Gary, thanks for the time. Good morning, man.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We were talking about Tennessee and talking about how they've looked the part all season long. Yesterday, they get their chance against the heavyweight #1 Gonzaga and take them down. What were your thoughts about the Volunteers after seeing them play yesterday afternoon?
Well, I thought they were capable of that type of thing really since the preseason. I had them preseason top 5, and I know that looked odd because they don't have the roster of a typical top 5 team. Right? There's not an obvious lottery pick there. There's probably not a first-round pick there. There's not a single former top 100 recruit on the roster, and yet they showed it last season after being picked 13th in the preseason SEC poll. They share the conference championship with Auburn, and when you can be that good consistently, and then you bring back basically every important piece from that team, you should be good and obviously better the following year. Now, do they have the high-level, top-shelf talent like Duke has to actually go win a national championship? I don't know, but when we're sitting here on December 10th and they've only got one loss, and the one loss is an overtime loss to the team I think is going to be ranked #1 in the country when the AP poll comes out today, that's Kansas, and they've got to win over a Gonzaga team that beat Duke, then they're obviously on the very short list of elite teams in the country.
Rick Barnes and the Volunteers, a great example of how the SEC has improved their basketball play. You brought up Bruce Pearl and Auburn as sharing the conference championship last season, but overall, your view of this conference and how they're playing on the hardwood right now.
Terrific. I mean, I think one of the 2 or 3 best conferences in the country. This is not something we would have said a year ago, 2 years ago, 4 years ago. I've told the story before, but it's worth repeating, I think, given the context of your question. Before Mike Fly left his position as commissioner of the SEC, one of his final instructions to his member institutions was invest in men's basketball, because they had just launched, or they were about to launch, the SEC network. And obviously football is king, but you can only put so many football
programming
games on because there's only so much inventory. But with men's basketball, there's a ton of inventory. And the best way to make the SEC network relevant was always going to be have good live sports on it. And that meant good men's basketball on it. And so his instructions were simple. If you've got the right coach, do whatever you got to do to keep him and give him every resource that he needs to be successful. If you don't, fire your guy and go get the right coach. Invest in facilities, invest in recruiting, invest in assistants. And in recent years, if you started looking at, because all of this stuff is available, recruiting budgets of SEC schools, assistant coaching salary pools for SEC schools, all of the stuff that can show that you're really investing in a program, the SEC was #1 in the country across the board.
Wow.
And then it started to show up in recruiting rankings, and now it's starting to show up on the court. And so, listen, football is always going to be king in the SEC. It'll always be king at LSU and most of the SEC schools. But there's never been a rule that you can't be good or great at multiple things. And we've seen Florida do this, national championships in football, basketball. Ohio State do this. Final Fours in basketball, national championships in football. You don't have to pick. You can do both, particularly when you have as much revenue as SEC schools. And what we're seeing this year is an example of that.
We're talking to Gary Parrish at Gary Parrish CBS here on Off the Bench. And Gary, this brings us to LSU then, because a lot of what you just touched on, I think we're actually seeing here locally. I'll start with Will Wade. There's a lot of excitement about his leadership. You talked about finding the right coach. We think we found that. What is the outsider, the kind of national view on Will Wade and what he's doing at LSU?
Listen, I've known Will for a long time. I've been a fan of Will's for a long time. When Memphis lost Josh Pastner, or more accurately, pushed Josh Pastner out the door to Georgia Tech, Will was on the short list of coaches I thought Memphis should have pursued at that time. They ended up hiring Tubby Smith, and that was obviously a disaster. They're in a good place now with Penny Hardaway, but that's how highly I thought of Will. I don't know that he would have taken the Memphis job at the time, but and I should say for your listeners, I'm not just randomly bringing up Memphis. I happen to live in Memphis and host a radio show there.
92.9 in Memphis.
There you go. Thank you so much. And so what he's done at LSU is what you ought to do when you take a job like that if you're going to try to elevate it to the highest level of the sport. In fact, over the past couple of years, every time Tubby Smith would talk about it takes time to build, it takes time to recruit, I would immediately point to LSU and Will and say, well, it didn't take Will any time. I know they weren't good last year, but he was doing all of the things that was going to make it good very quickly. He enrolls Tremont Waters, then he gets commitments from 5-star prospects, and what you see now is the byproduct of that. I know that the Advocare Invitational didn't go the way anybody wanted it to go, Will included, but when you've got players, you've got a chance. And he's got players, and that's a team that I think is going to, finish pretty high in the SEC standings, and that's a team that's going to be in the NCAA tournament. And when you think about where LSU was just a few years ago and compare it to where LSU is right now, it is night and day. And I'm with you. LSU went out and they did something that a lot of schools tried to do for years but couldn't, specifically make a VCU coach lead VCU.
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
And
that's true.
a whole bunch of schools tried to get Shaka Smart to leave and
right.
couldn't do it. He finally left for Texas, which was, a big job, and that's the one you actually leave for. But getting a VCU coach to lead VCU hasn't, in recent years, been easy. LSU got it done, and LSU got it right.
Hey, Gary, tell us about the Coaching for Literacy and what's going on. Yesterday, a lot of people showing up to the arena and saw Will Wade and his staff in the all-green ties, and I know that you're a voice behind this.
Yeah, I'm very lucky to be able to work with those guys, day in and day out for years now. It's a organization that was started, and it's still rooted in my hometown of Memphis. The statistics are pretty remarkable, and by remarkable I mean depressing. 64% of kids in the United States of America in the fourth grade are not reading at fourth grade level.
No,
and that we're supposed to be this advanced, sophisticated, wealthy country, and we are in many ways. But we really do struggle as a country with literacy, and it's something Coaching for Literacy is working hard to change. What they do is work with sports teams, and it started with college basketball, but now it's even drifting into the NBA. They pair with teams to generate awareness about the importance of literacy and its impact on social issues such as employment, crime, poverty, and economy. There's a lot of data that suggests if you struggle with reading, you will struggle in every aspect of your life. And so it started as just little more than an idea. And a few short years later, it's provided more than $200,000 to fund 75 different literacy projects supporting 10,000 children across this country. I've seen the work that they do up close, and it's really awesome that they've allowed me to be a part of it. And it's also tremendous that Will and his staff and that university in general has been willing to be a participant, because it really does help. It really does change lives. And like I said, it's cool that LSU was willing to jump on board and has been a good partner for multiple years now.
How can we and our listeners support?
Well, you go to coachingforliteracy.org. That's the website, and you'll see all of the Fight for Literacy games that are on the schedule. Obviously, LSU's was yesterday, but there's plenty more the rest of this season, and there's obvious and easy ways to donate. There's various ways to donate, and this money doesn't just go nowhere. It goes often to literacy projects right in the community where you live, which means it's improving your community in a very tangible way. So I would just encourage anybody to go to coachingforliteracy.org and check it out and see the good work, the people who founded this and who are running this, the good work that they're doing every single day.
Fantastic host of the podcast, Eye on College Basketball podcast. He also hosts the Gary Parrish Show, 92.9 FM in Memphis, and is a college basketball columnist and TV analyst for CBS Sports. Kind enough with his time here on Monday morning on Twitter at Gary Parrish, CBS Gary Parrish, for some minutes here on Off the Bench. Thanks, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. Take care.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Gary. Have a
we'll
good
do it
one,
again
man.
soon. There he is, Gary Parrish, talking some college hoop. We'll be back and close that hour number one.